Hello, welcome back to our live coverage of the UN Climate Talks here in Cancun, Mexico. We've been with you for pretty much the last 4 hours, so we're going to give you a bit of a news wrap-up of the stuff that's been happening here over the weekend and today, and then give you a bit of an insight into the reaction of some of the countries here at the United Nations Climate Talks, what they've had to say about the negotiating text that countries are arguing over. So these talks have been going on for a week now, and it's part of this big global effort to deal with climate change. And this second week of the talks is going to see environment ministers from countries around the world arrive here at the convention centre, at the hotel up the road actually, and they're going to meet and try and thrash out some answers from these negotiating texts. On Saturday we saw a new text put down for the two main conversations that are going on here. So these UN climate talks are happening along two tracks. One track is aiming to get a big global agreement amongst all countries, and that's called the Long-Term Cooperative Action Track. The other track is looking to basically commit almost 40 rich countries to some kind of emissions cuts in the short term. The rationale behind this is that rich countries have been emitting more pollution, and they've been emitting pollution for longer, and they're also richer. They can afford to do something about it. Whilst poor countries are being impacted more, they're being impacted first, and they can't afford to do anything about it. So these new texts were put on the table. The chair of the Long-Term Cooperative Action Track put down a new text for the ministers to negotiate, and most countries were relatively happy with it as far as these things go. We can expect to see some friction over this week as people say what they don't like about the text and what they do like about the text. Pablo Salon, who is the ambassador of Bolivia to the UN Climate Talks, he came out and he said he felt that these negotiating texts were very one-sided. And this has been something that the international environmental group Friends of the Earth has also agreed with. They say it's hugely compromised and that it doesn't respect the rights of poor countries. And so we're talking now about this big effort to find a global solution in the long-term cooperative action track. Friends of the Earth complain that there's no reference to a temperature target of 1.5 degrees, and so lots of scientists now are saying that if global warming goes over 1.5 degrees, then many countries around the world are simply going to disappear. We can expect to see small island states sink, literally sink, and countries in Africa become shadow states. Their populations forced to flee, unable to farm the land, and their governments in exile. This has raised the prospect of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of climate refugees. And if you followed our coverage in Copenhagen last year, which was the last big climate meeting, then you'll know that the president of the Maldives is already looking for a new land for them. They're investigating the possibility of buying a new home, essentially, maybe in Bangladesh or possibly in Australia. So these are really quite big issues, and no reference to a temperature target of 1.5 degrees. Many scientists say is effectively condemning millions of people around the world to lose their homes, and many countries around the world to disappear, and their cultures along with them. Friends of the Earth have also complained that there's the omission of the phrase historical responsibilities in this text. So this is basically about rich countries acknowledging that actually we are responsible for developing, for producing CO2 and for getting us into the situation we're in now. We've developed on the back of these huge emissions. Our industry and industrial levels have caused the pollution, and they've also allowed us to get rich on the back of it. And there's already a belief that we need to acknowledge the fact that we're historically responsible for these emissions, and that we ought to do something about it first. Finally, there's some kind of concern that the proposals on the table don't really consider trade as an issue, and also don't properly protect intellectual property whilst allowing for technology transfer to the most vulnerable countries. So the idea here is that if we're expecting poor countries to reduce their own emissions, and if we're expecting that they should be able to adapt to some of the devastating consequences of climate change, then they're going to need some kind of technology to do it. We've spoken already in the last couple of days to people from small island states such as Kiribati in Fiji, and they've told us that they're really struggling for water at the moment. The salt water is infiltrating their freshwater systems as the sea level rises, and they simply, they're just trying to work out how on earth they're going to keep alive, basically. some really shocking stories about people trying to learn how to drink salt water. It makes you appreciate the fact that this is a problem which is affecting people around the world here and now. So this is the kind of the status of the talks. We've got the Bolivian ambassador who's come out and said that he's not happy with the text. Some environmental groups like Friends of the Earth saying the same. But on the other side of the coin, there's the suggestion that actually not all countries are happy with this stance. Maybe some people feel that Bolivia and its allies, so with Venezuela, Ecuador, and many other countries in Africa, in poorer developing nations. Some people say they're not being realistic. That in the US, the public simply aren't willing to support this is an issue in the United States, and unless they do, then how can we expect them to make serious cuts, and how can you demand serious cuts from the negotiators here when they don't have a mandate to make them at home? Now, the Bolivian ambassador, Pablo Solon, drew an analogy with human temperature, and he said, if your average human temperature rises by 1 degree, then or 1.5 degrees, then maybe you have a bit of a fever. If it increases by 3 or 4 degrees, then you start having seizures, and if it increases by over 4 degrees, then you're going to die. Now, according to the latest science, our planet is set to increase by temperatures of about 4 to 5 degrees. So a stark warning there. For their part, Friends of the Earth, a big international campaigning group here, rejected the argument that they should be more pragmatic in their cause. They said there is nothing pragmatic about locking a world into a 5-degree future, which will cause unimaginable suffering. So some big questions starting to arise in these talks as we hit the second week. These negotiations are reaching their climax. We're going to expect them to. We can expect some of these issues to come to the forefront over the next couple of days. Finally, unless you've been hiding in a cave for the last few weeks, you'll have heard about the WikiLeaks scandal. This is a release of about 250,000 United States diplomatic cables from embassies around the world. Now, one of the implications of this is that it's kind of shone a light on the US diplomatic strategy at these talks. And what it shows is that they have effectively been denying aid or denying support to countries unless they firmly back a US position, which you may feel is reasonable or you may not. But the implication is that some people are questioning the integrity of these negotiations. Forcing other countries to agree under pressure isn't so much as a negotiation, it's more of an imposition. So it's affected the tone of these talks. It's not all bad news though, and there's been some good news here. There's a lot of youth campaigners at these United Nations climate talks who it's often youth who are worried about this issue. They see that it's their planet they're inheriting. They realise that every single ecosystem that we recognise is being depleted, and that every single life system that we have is in decline. And they're really passionate about this issue. And the youth here have had a big win over the weekend. They've been campaigning to make education a real central part of these talks. They believe that it's critical that younger people are more aware of the science, they're more aware of the implications of climate change, they have a better understanding of how this issue is impacting people around the world, and also a real emphasis on climate change's role in the economy and the potential for growth. If you were following our coverage in China a couple of months ago, you'll have heard that China is now the world leader in wind power, and also a number of other renewable sectors. And a lot of people here are really passionate about the fact that we're seeing renewable energies and the renewable sector and the clean tech sector boom in countries in the East, whilst those of us in the West are rather neglecting this huge opportunity for kind of a new economic model and a more profitable and cleaner one. So the youth here have been active. They've made sure that education is a central part of these talks, and it's been a busy day for them. Our coverage is going to draw to a close now. We've been on air for about 4 hours, which is long enough, I think. But we're going to leave you with a press conference from the Bolivian ambassador earlier today, You can maybe get some perspectives on developing countries' feelings about these talks and what they believe would be fair. And it was also worth hanging around and watching the question and answer session at the end, because it's a pretty fiery one. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow at 4 o'clock local time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 10 o'clock UK time. So please do join us then, and we'll leave you with this press conference.